This is my first sermon in in a few weeks, so I'm excited. Okay. All right, taking a moment to drop in with me. We're going to begin with an opening prayer. Let's start with Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. Beloved source of light, flame of truth within every heart, we gather in this space not to escape our challenges, but to meet them as doorways to grace. Where we feel resistance, let us discover revelation. Where we feel delay, let us uncover divine timing. May our hearts be open, our breath steady, and our awareness anchored in presence. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Guru Om, Amen, Aho, Ashe, and so it is. Feel the stillness settle. Let it take shape in the body. Let it soften the edges of the mind. Returning home, the mirror of resistance. The wound is the place where the light enters you, said Rumi. This month, I returned home to Ohio. It was beautiful to see my family again, to share meals, laughter, to sit inside walls that once raised me. And yet, there was a heaviness, not because love wasn't there, it was, but because old stories were too. So I ask you, have you ever gone home and felt yourself shrink a little? Like the energy of the past tries to pull you back into an older version of yourself. This is not regression, it's reflection. When we return to where our story began, a spirit reminds us and sometimes replays the same lesson, but now from a higher octave. You know, what I learned when I was there, I always explain it this way, is that, my life growth happens in spirals. It's a vortex energy. And when I'm not growing and the opposite of growing is I'm degrowing, I guess you would say, it happens like spirals. They say like, oh, I'm flushing my life down the toilet. Well, the toilet moves counterclockwise or clockwise, depending on which side of the world you're on. But that happens in this, you have this ability in those moments to kind of see what's going on from a different perspective. And so when I went home to Ohio, it was interesting to be in familiar places, to go I had a doctor's appointment, to go to Columbus, where I spent a lot of my time in my active addiction, and just to see the older version of me and the thoughts. They weren't present, they weren't in front of me, but I could see them as ghosts in my peripheral. And it's like the thought of, oh, I used to have craving here, but it wasn't the thought of I'm having a craving, which gave me the ability to see how much I've grown and how much I've evolved. And so, we have these choices that we get to make. For me, it comes in this brief moment of awareness where I'm at the top of a cycle. And in that brief moment of awareness, I have two choices. I can take the stairs to my left and I can evolve into the next cycle, or I can ignore the stairs and continue on the cycle that I'm on, repeating all the old behavior, repeating all of the old patterns until I've suffered enough that by the time I get back to that moment of awareness, I decide to take the stairs. And that's certainly what I've done in my life. And what's interesting is when you take the stairs and you're on your next journey of evolution, you can still see the floor below. You don't engage with it. It's the shadows of your former self as you continue to evolve. So the universe doesn't test us to torment us. It mirrors us so we can see what's been integrated and what still needs our tenderness. And once we recognize that mirror, we begin to see that resistance isn't here to hold us back. It's here to sharpen us. And that brings me to our next truth, the nature of resistance, friction as teacher. Brings me to a verse in the Bible, Proverbs chapter 27, verse 17, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. And I really like this verse because it speaks to the importance of the people we surround ourselves with. In my old life, when I was back in Columbus, I didn't go and visit any of the people who I used to engage in those behaviors with because they're no longer in my crowd. They're no longer in my circle. Instead, I engage with people like the folks that are on Horizon Council, like Christopher, people who are also on this spiral journey of growth and evolution, because I recognize that as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. And it's super important for me to engage with the people who are moving in the direction of evolution. And in that, I had to resist myself with like the pool of like wanting to go to say hi to these people because they were a big part of my life and be like, hey, look how much I've grown. But that would have been taking the stairs down and not taking the stairs up, and recognizing that they're on their journey and I have to give them space to be on their journey, and I have to protect my integrity. I have to protect my journey. And so resistance isn't punishment, it's polishing. Every time we meet friction in our lives, it is refining us. In the journey of recovery, I meet a lot of resistance. I have to, in the beginning, I had to resist the temptation to go out and use. I had to resist the temptation to engage in old behavior. And that resistance was the fire that forges the new version of myself. And so the ego wants comfort, but the soul wants growth. And growth is not soft, it's sacred pressure. Growth is not always the most comfortable thing to experience, but in that growth, as we expand, we have the capacity to hold more for ourselves. We have the capacity to move towards the life that we're designed to live. So when I left Ohio, I thought the next phase would unfold easily. I had it all lined up, paperwork done, which took a little extra time, plans clear, the route to Bucerias mapped, just a simple drive from Texas back to Mexico. But Spirit had other plans, more delays, more confusion, more waiting, more paperwork that wouldn't process, and plans suspended. And there was again resistance. But instead of fighting it, I began to listen. I began to ease into it. I began to just to observe the resistance in my body, to observe the resistance and see that it had a bigger plan, that there was a plan there that I had to lean into and surrender. And what I heard was this: you're not stuck, you're being still. Sometimes the universe has to teach us what stillness looks like. And that's really what it is. It's just learning to have this relationship with stillness. And I've found oftentimes in my life, like I'll continue to keep pushing until I hit a wall so hard that I don't have any choice but to be still. And there is a profound difference between stagnation and stillness. When the ego says I'm stuck, it's trapped in resistance. But when the soul says I'm still, it's rooted in reverence. And what I mean by that is it's rooted in the reverence of the experience. It's rooted in the surrender that is letting go and allowing. And in that allowing, we're more capable of seeing the options that are available to us. Like when I have my sights set on one destination, and that's where I'm heading, and nothing is going to stop me, what happens is I lose sight of the beauty of what's happening around me. I lose sight of all of the other doors and opportunities that may be available to me. Because sometimes doors open unexpectedly. But when the ego says, but the pause, again, is not punishment, it's preparation. So sometimes Spirit will hold us in a sacred waiting room until we are calibrated for the next frequency of our journey. Sometimes we have to sit and integrate the lessons that we've learned before we can fully show up for the next part of our story. So I ask you, how many of you have been in a waiting room lately? How many of you can relate to that sacred pause that happens before movement begins to begin again? And so that moves us into our journey back here to Mexico, the long road home, and the lessons that it taught us. And this, I'll start with Psalm chapter 23, verses 2 and 3. He leads me beside still waters, and he restores my soul. So when Christopher and I finally got on the road from Texas to Mexico, I thought we were just driving home. But it became something else entirely for me. The drive stretched on what felt like forever, but was only 2 days. Flatlands, endless sky, and the long ribbon, literally ribbon, of highway unfolding mile by mile. It was as if the road itself was alive, yet endless, and speaking in silence. Each hour a teacher, and each town a mirror. And to be honest with you, at first I felt dense. I didn't feel liberated at all. My body felt tired, my spirit felt heavy, and I could feel the residue of everything that I just left behind. I could feel like a sense of disappointment that there was unfinished business where there was none. And as we drove those wide Texas plains, Spirit whispered, "Let the road do its work." Every stretch of open land became a reflection of my inner landscape. And I realized resistance was riding shotgun. It wasn't trying to stop me. It was asking simply to be witnessed. And so I stopped resisting the resistance. I put my headphones on with noise cancellation because Christopher likes to listen to a lot of mantra really loudly. So I was like, I need silence. And so we both could have our own space. I put my headphones in with noise cancellation because I just needed to be in silence. I just needed to be with the yuck that I was feeling. I didn't want to change it. I didn't want to meditate it away. I didn't want to over spiritualize it. I just wanted to feel like crap for the 2 days that we were driving. And that was okay because I needed to have that experience. I needed to just calibrate my body and my soul and my mind and my emotions to everything that we had just gone through over the previous 27 days. And so I rode in silence. And somewhere between mile marker 0 and what felt like mile marker 10,000, the highway shimmered under a low sun, and I felt something shift. As we got closer to home, I felt something shift inside of me. And the further south we drove, the lighter I felt. Not because the miles were passing, but because the weight was. The air changed, my breath deepened, and home wasn't just a location anymore, it was a frequency. That drive became a living sermon, a sacred pilgrimage through the landscape of resistance. Because here is the truth. The journey itself, day by day, moment by moment, is the purification. It's that journey, it's the resistance that is the sandpaper that our soul needs to shine. So you don't reach peace by rushing, you remember peace by resting. You know, for a long time, I just kept trying to rush to peace. If I get this done and this done and this done, I can finally sit down and be at peace. But then when I do that, I've already created this current of momentum that when I sit down, I'm still traveling emotionally, mentally, spiritually in that momentum, and I have a hard time letting myself settle. And so what I'm learning is that there is a way to carry this peace moment by moment, act by act, obligation by obligation. And how I do that is I just allow. There is something beautiful in allowing. When you know I make a commitment and I keep that commitment, that it's really nice to have that bookmark because then when I get to that commitment, I already know I'm going to show up for it. I can just allow myself to have the experience. I don't have to overperform. I don't have to overreact. I can just be in the experience and be present for what I'm experiencing. And in that presence, my relationships deepen. The lessons that I learn from what I'm experiencing deepen. And what this resistance does is allows us to deepen our experience of life, to deepen the lessons, to bring more of ourselves into everything that we do. So spirit doesn't measure distance, spirit measures depth. Every mile you travel within yourself brings you closer to home. And going deeper into this, presence as alchemy, alchemy being the thing that changes one thing to another, staying steady in the storm. And I'm going to start this off with Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. And in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali says yoga is the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind. So when resistance appears, the true invitation is presence. Because when we are fully present, resistance loses its grip on the nervous system. I noticed this while sitting with my family in Ohio, old arguments wanting to reappear, old roles wanting to replay. But instead of reacting, I breathed. I grounded into the now. And I chose to observe instead of absorb. I chose to just be present and allow others to have their experience, to allow others to have their journey, their own evolution. And that presence actually calmed the room. That my sister even came up to me at one point. She goes, I don't think our family sees what I see. And I asked her, I said, what do you see? She goes, there's a hum coming off of you. And that hum, that vibration was me just simply being present. Not wanting to be anywhere else like before. Whenever I would spend time with my family, I was always waiting to leave so I could go do the crazy things I would do. Or I would be so stuck in all of the things that they had done to me in the past that I was sitting there so resentful that I didn't want anything to do with them. But instead on this trip, and this makes me really kind of emotional, I I just allowed myself to be with them and not feel the need to change them in any way, not feel the need to like step in and make their journey easier. Just simply honor them and love them for who they are. And in that presence, it calmed the room. In that presence, everyone else around me was able to show up as themselves and not feel the need to perform. And the resistance that I felt to my family dissolved. And that's the goal, is to like find ways to see the resistance and what it actually means and to dissolve it into presence. To show up fully for the things in our lives without the need to fix, change, pull, alter. Because all of those are different forms of resistance, different forms of not allowing the present to be what it is. So presence became my protection. Each breath whispered, I am no longer that version of myself. And the realization, it's the essence of transformation. Presence lets us hold both truths at once. The polarity. The healing is happening and that it's still unfolding. So let's take a breath together, knowing that healing can be incomplete and still holy. Taking a deep breath in and release. All things are holy. The resistance is holy. The lessons that come from the resistance is holy. And you are holy. And so this brings me to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. And the Bhagavad Gita says, fire refines gold and adversity refines the soul. In physics, resistance creates heat. In fitness, resistance builds strength. In spirit, resistance awakens awareness. Every day, every delay carries data. Every obstacle hides an opportunity for surrender, and every not yet is an act of divine choreography. The moment you stop pushing against what is, the current of grace begins to carry you forward. And when you surrender, not in defeat, but in devotion, you stop leaking energy. You stop fighting what's meant to teach you, and that's when resistance transforms into revelation, into growth. And this brings me to our closing reflection and blessing from John chapter 1, verse 5. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So if you find yourself delayed, discouraged, or in an atmosphere that feels too heavy, remember, you are not backsliding, you are deepening. Resistance is not a blockade, it's a birth canal. And when that path clears, you won't just move forward, you'll rise higher to the next octave. Because you didn't resist the resistance, you transmuted it. So may every mile become a mantra, every delay on your doorway a new doorway, and every return a revelation. So let us close in prayer. Beloved Creator, teach us to meet life as it comes, not with fear, but with faith. Let resistance reveal our resilience. Let waiting awaken our wisdom. May every delay be seen as divine orchestration of grace. May we move forward, not from force, but from flow. Not from impatience, but from peace. And in the name of love that liberates, light that guides, and truth that endures, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Guru Om, Amen, Aho, Ashe, and so it is. And so, beloveds, we come to rest in what we've heard. The teaching becomes truth only when it is felt. Christopher will now guide us in a short meditation to help us embody the path home. So